My name's Jonathan, and I've been part of this church for quite a long time. And Tom asked myself and Jackie, my wife, to speak this morning because we got Craig and Ruth. Where are you, Craig and Ruth? Chris, wave. They're at the back. They look like they're trying to run away. All right, and we got Tom and Josie down here. There's Josie? Oh, they're not sat together. That doesn't mean you've had an argument this morning, does it? That's good. All right. And Kevin Lids, where are you? There's Lids. Ah, you're not sort of Kevin. There's a bit of a theme going on. Craig and Ruth, well done. I have extra marriage points or something. You're actually on the same row. We're going to talk today about some things to do with parenting. Now, you might be sat here and not have any kids of your own, but it will have something to do with you. There'll be things that you can get from this as well. I don't know, maybe you're an uncle or aunt, maybe you've got relationships with people you know who've got children, and I'm sure that you'll get something out of today, as well as us being a church family, supporting perhaps parents like we're doing today, who are giving thanks to God for their kids. We can parent together and help them on that journey. But we've got two kids of our own. I forgot to say that in the first service. One's 11, one's 7. They're pretty good most of the time. And we're pretty good parents most of the time, but not all the time, all right? We're not standing here because we are like the best parents in the church. In fact, if you come into our house about a week ago, it was chaos and we felt totally, hello, young man. He might have got more to say than me. We're not here because we get it right. Okay, but we know that we get help from one another on this journey of parenting, as well as help from God, who likes to help his earthly children as well. So I've got a slide I'd like you to look at first of all. All right. Okay, so you're 10 years old. You have a laptop, iPod, Facebook, and a BlackBerry. Dude, when I was 10, I had Pokemon cards. Now, you might feel this morning that that sums it up for you, because you might look at these mad people giving thanks today for their kids, thinking, oh, it's such a different world to when I grew up. I still remember my mum, when we were around the dinner table one day when I was about 7, explaining to me when they first got TV. And now my son watches TV on my phone. It's a bit of a culture difference. And I don't think that it's more difficult parenting now than it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 150 years ago. It's a different context, and there are always new challenges. And when our kids have grown up, and perhaps they're on this stage of life in 25, 30 years, you hope, time, they will face new challenges. But there will always be challenges of how you relate to your children and how you parent them. And I thought some of these next slides would help you to tap into where I've been thinking the last few weeks. So let's have the next one. Right. No one comes along with a manual, do they, when you're a mum or a dad, stepmum or stepdad, to tell you how to do it. And actually, on this journey of parenting, I'm sure Craig and Ruth and Tom and Joseph and Kevin Liz have already had these kind of feelings so far that actually they've kind of made mistakes. They kind of revisit things over and over again. They get things wrong. They may even have had to say sorry to some of their kids sometimes. And you don't always get it right. And parenting can feel a bit of a hazardous journey. I'm not good on roundabouts, if you know my crash history with cars, but it's true that, parenting, it sometimes is a challenge in all sorts of ways, isn't it? And we don't always get it right the first time, the second time, or the third time. But, it is a challenge that all of us are on. Let's have the next one, please. Definitely, you start off life and you think, oh, we got these kids, you've been waiting for them to come along. These signs for me summed up what it was like. I remember the first week, Aaron was on the planet. I had to do a boring thing called go to the bank. You still have to do that when you're parents, all right, with little children. And I had to pay a check-in that never seemed like a difficult job before that moment. And he was in the pushchair. You get lots of admiring glances when you're a father with your child. There are lots of people like to look in and smile. I think, is he really looking that good? And that's the child, not me. And I was paying the check-in, and it was going well. Then Aaron woke up in Abbey National, and it was before Santander. And I thought, you're not meant to wake up until at least we get home. And I felt a bit like that sign at the top. There was a dip. I hadn't seen it coming. I didn't know what to do. There was a queue. There's always a queue in Abbey National. Bank with actually, don't bank with Barclays. Bank with someone else, all right? Kent Reliance. And I thought, they're all looking at me. This kid's crying and I don't know what to do. And you feel like that as a mum and a dad, or, stepmom, stepdad sometimes, don't you? And you just think, what on earth do I do? Everyone's looking at me. Next slide, please. I don't know, you kind of go through your parenting days, and you feel sometimes, I've had to negotiate this situation through. I've hostage negotiated with my child. I've got them to give way. I've given way. Then you might think, oh no, I'm not meant to give way. I'm meant to have a naughty step, and they never move from the naughty step. And I shouldn't do U-turns because that means I'm a bad parent and I've just got it wrong and I've failed. And so, I think we can all be very harsh on ourselves because we think we don't always get it right. Things come along that you weren't anticipating. You think you've got this, terrible twos sorted, and then suddenly you're into school and they're coming home with words that you've not said at home. And you're facing new challenges that you couldn't foresee. And they're coming home with questions and points of view that aren't your point of view. And they're picking up from other people. And there's like a hidden dip because you couldn't see it coming and you won't always get it right. And then, of course, there's the 30-mile-an-hour sign, and you try to convince them and yourself that they won't get a boyfriend and girlfriend until they're 30. But anyhow, I think some of those signs give us a little taste of how difficult it is to parent. And you don't always get it right, but we do have a God who wants to help us to get it right as best we can. So we're just going to take a little verse in Ephesians chapter 6, this morning. And there are some of these verses that you will have heard spoken about a lot, and we're not going to talk about those bits. So, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. We're not going to talk about that bit. Honor your father and mother, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children. All right, dads, listen to that bit. Fathers, do not wind up your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, the beginning of that and the end of that often gets spoken about in church, but people don't often talk about the bit that it says, so it may go well with you. And that's what we want to talk to these guys giving thanks for their kids today about, just some principles, helping them that it will go well with them over the next 30, 40, 50, however long you hang out, years of your life, and you will be parents. Because some of you are sitting in the room today, your kids are like 30, 40 years old. You still face challenges, don't you, as mum and dad? Not just those people who've got 6 months, 2 years old kids. You always face challenges. So if we could have the next slide, please. We're going to keep this one up here. These are the kind of points that we're going to come back to as we go through today. And for those of you who go to midweek groups, we're going to have things to talk about and discuss as you go to those groups over the coming weeks. But first of all, it's more likely to go well with you as a mum and dad if actually you teach your kids that God isn't their granddad. And you might say, well, Jonathan, what do you mean by that? God's not their granddad. Well, I remember one day scurrying under my parents' bed. I made a factual error in the first service. I was only 10 years old. I said I was older in the first service. 10 years old. I found love letters from my dad to my mum. I never found any from my mum to my dad, and I really liked it when I found them. They were quite interesting. And I don't think they've ever found out that I found their love letters. But I was reading them, and they were all right. They were a little bit fruity, not too fruity. And there was a bit I found in one love letter where my dad actually wrote to my mum when he was about 21 years old about the time he became a Christian. I thought, Dad, this is so weird. That's not in the list of 10 things to talk to girls about. And it struck me as a 10-year-old that my dad had a very real faith in God that I didn't have. And actually, for someone growing up, I had to work out that my dad's faith was my dad's faith, and I had to come to my own faith in God. And actually, as parents, Craig and Ruth, Tom and Jose, and Kevin, Liz, you are encouraging your kids on a journey to find their own faith in God, and it won't be your faith, although there'll be things in common with it, but they have to know God for themselves, and they can't just have a second-hand faith, just like your granddad is not your dad. And your children will go on a bit of a journey. And to start off with, everything's done to them, isn't it? They have things read to them. They have prayers said to them. They are taken to church and put in the creche or in kids' work, and everything is done to them. And that stage of their life is kind of experienced faith, and they've not really got too much saying what goes on. And then they'll go into like a spectator time when they're kind of like looking around, and they do it because everyone else is doing it. Just like you're spectating at a football match or a concert, and they're there because everyone else is there, so they look the same way as everyone else. But it's still not their faith because they're kind of checking things out. And you realize as mum and dad that there's all sorts of people influencing them that aren't you anymore. And it's kind of that first time you hear that song on the radio and you're in the car with them in the back and you're thinking, these lyrics are decidedly dodgy for my 7-year-old to hear. You will go into a phase of life with your children where other people influence them and challenge the things that you've tried to do in their lives. And that can come from people who are quite small or people who are quite tall and everything in between. So you'll then go into a searching phase. Not you, your child. And they might even come home and go, actually, Tom, don't want to come to church anymore on a Sunday because I quite find it boring. And your world implodes because what you think's amazing, they kind of find boring. Or they'll have questions. They go, actually, Kev, I don't really think God is that loving because of this, that, and the other. Or, they'll come home with a different challenge to you, I'm sure, Craig and Ruth. But, there'll be something that they come and they'll have doubts about or they'll question. And actually, as mum and dad, it's all right if your kids have doubts. And it's all right if your kids question things because, think of Jesus' disciples, think of his followers. John the Baptist, when he was in prison, just about to have his head chopped off, he had lots of doubts about Jesus, about who this person was he'd been talking about. Thomas had plenty of doubts until he saw things for himself. But it's fine as mum and dad to have a kid who has doubts. But you're trying to get them on this journey where they know God for themselves. And if you're just giving them your faith all the time, they won't work out their own. So you want them to get to the point where they actually own their faith for themselves. Where actually what they're certain of and what they hope for, they've discovered because God has revealed himself to them. And part of your journey as parents is to allow them to get to that point. And sometimes they take a stage right when you want them to go straight on. And sometimes you've got to trust in God. And it's a bit hard when you can't see the route it's going. So, owned faith is where you want your children to get to because actually you want your kids to know God as their father and not as their granddad. And so ups and downs are going to come along the way, just like those road signs. Now, Jackie, she's going to come and share a couple of bits with you for 10 minutes or so, and then I'm going to jump back up.
That's my time limit. I'll go fast then. Okay. I remember, 11 years now, the first trip that I made to the supermarket after Aaron was born and trying to work out the trolley. I was very worried about whether the car seat would fit in the trolley. I was worried about whether I would get round the whole supermarket remembering everything without him crying. Was I going to get through the checkout without him having to need to be fed or changed? And I really did feel quite sick that first trip. And then there have been many other occasions in my parenting life that I have felt quite sick because the overwhelming sense of responsibility sometimes is very, very challenging. And I would say that for me, one of the major goals for me of raising my children is to help them develop their character, that it may go well in their future life. So whether their future is next week or next year, or whether it's when they get a job or go to university or get married, I want to encourage their character, develop their character so that it may go well for them in their future. Proverbs, a verse in the Bible, 22 verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he's old, he will not depart from it." Like the verse that Jonathan referred to, this verse too is a principle that we can be encouraged to follow, that things might go well for us. We as Christians, in so many areas of our lives, we take the example of Jesus to guide us, and this should be the same in our parenting or in your role as a school teacher. I'm a school teacher. Or if you're an auntie or an uncle, or if you work in the city kids work, or if you just have any involvement with children, we can take the example of Jesus. Jesus didn't have his own physical children, but he had a group of disciples around him that he nurtured, and he tried to teach them in the way they should go. In Matthew, one of the Gospels, in chapters 5 to 7, there's Jesus is teaching his disciples, and it's the Sermon on the Mount, and it's full of what I call in my trade bossy verbs. So telling them how they should live. He says, "Pray then like this: do not be anxious. ask and it will be given to you. What Jesus doesn't do, he's not passive and let them make their own decisions. He doesn't say, make your own decisions about what's right. He's too young to understand. He'll grow out of it. That's not what Jesus does. Jesus sets boundaries and he trains his disciples. And that's what we can do for our children, whatever their age, to help it go well. So one of the ways that we can do that is to set purposeful boundaries. We need to do this for lots of reasons. And while I was preparing for this, I read a book called Boundaries with Kids. There's also one called Boundaries with Teenagers. And there's one just called Boundaries, which is particularly for adults, which I recommend. And they are on in our bookshop if you want to get those. But just some of the things that it encourages, or the book, and in my research, I want to encourage you to set boundaries, is first of all to protect our children. Another reason is to develop their character. And another reason is that so that we can have peace and love and security in our family life. So firstly then, to protect our children, it's not just to stop them from running into the road or to stop them doing naughty things, but it's to protect their hearts as well. Just recently, Anna was playing out on our road. She's our 7-year-old, and she plays with the kids next door. And I just kind of poked my head out the window a few minutes before she was due to come in, and I heard quite flowery language coming from one of the children. And I just really felt that I didn't want her to think that that environment was okay. So I went out and managed to just kind of coax her in and say, look, don't really want you to be listening to that kind of language. And for Jonathan and I, the next hour and a half was one of those war zones, because Anna would not cooperate with anything that we asked her to do. And by the time she went to bed, an hour and a half later, we were exhausted. She was exhausted. There'd probably been quite a few tears all around. It was a very difficult time. And in that situation, we could have just left her, or we could have sent her back out again to say, oh, okay. But we didn't. We made a decision, and we had to deal with the consequences, which were quite difficult. But we knew that that was what our expectation was, that she would not be surrounded by that kind of language. So we were trying to protect her heart. Another area is to develop their character. And I probably want to use Aaron a bit more for this description, this way that we try to set boundaries with him. We try to encourage him to deal with things that he faces at school, and particularly conflicts. And we have quite a lot of times he's come home with situations that have happened, and we've discussed them together and talked about what the right thing to do is, and then sent him back into school. We haven't gone in feet first as parents trying to sort out all his difficulties, because we're nurturing him, his character, in the way that he should deal with conflict. If we went in and dealt with them, then it doesn't help him to deal with conflict. And he might face conflict next year when he starts secondary school, and we can't be there as much. He might face conflict when he starts a work situation or at university. We can't be there with him. In his marriage, he might face a difficult time there. If we haven't set those boundaries as a young boy, then how can he grow? He needs to have those boundaries in place to develop his character, to deal with situations. And as painful as it is sometimes, we have to train our children in the way they should go. There are a few other boundaries I just wanted to mention that help to develop our children's character, that will affect them in their adult lives, or even in their not so distant future lives. So things like laziness. Are we nurturing laziness in our children? Do we pick up everything that they drop on the floor, or do we run them around everywhere instead of encouraging them to get on their bike? Do we encourage them to be determined and stick at things? We've had a few conversations where we've encouraged our children to keep going to a club until it finishes its session, so that they get the idea that although they might not like things so much, they have to stick at them. Another thing is that as parents, we try to work hard to provide for our children. And so often, if you get to that place where you're earning a good salary, you're able to give your children everything that they need. But does that tell them that everything just comes easily? Do we nurture in them the fact that there are people out there who struggle and we have to work hard for things that we need? And finally, our respect for authority. If you're a teacher, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because respect for authority is something that we're faced with on a daily basis. Where there's just we as parents, do we respect authority so that we can nurture that in our children, so that it may go well with them? Finally, in this part about boundaries, to have boundaries, they bring peace and love and security to our family life. Jonathan always said earlier that family life is not always peaceful and loving and secure in the Hopkins house. There are times when it has been incredibly difficult, but there are things that we can do to try and nurture that. Do we set the boundary of bedtime? Do we? Aaron's a bit older now, so sometimes he's not ready to go to bed when we're ready to sit down and have time together. So we often send him up to his room, or he goes in a different room so that we can have quality time together. Do the younger siblings have an earlier bedtime so that their older siblings can have time with you? Just all those kind of things. Bedtimes give us peace in our family. I've mentioned laziness already, but the way that siblings talk to each other, do we allow them to show disrespect to each other? Do we allow them to do that? We probably daily encourage our children to speak well to each other and love each other. And the way that they speak to you as well, do they speak respectfully to you? Do you encourage each other as parents to have good talking going on in your family? Forgiveness and saying sorry brings security to your family. Sometimes that's quite a long process, isn't it, to ask to get your children to be reunited and to show forgiveness and sorry, but it does bring security. They can start again. And these long processes, sometimes to follow through on an expectation, are quite hard. You've seen it in supermarkets probably, do we give in to children because they get louder and more persistent? Or do we set our boundary? What are the expectations of our family life? What do we want our family life to be like? Do we seek to bring peace and love and security? Just before we start to set boundaries for our children, we perhaps need to look at ourselves as adults. Do we have boundaries ourselves? How do you spend your time? How do you deal with conflict? What are your attitudes to different things? Have you ever listened to your child in the car when you're driving and they go, stupid driver? Who do they get that from? So listen to or think about your own life and what boundaries you set yourself. Another thing is that it's really good, especially in a church family where we can support each other, have a network of support. I was just saying earlier that Philippa is one of my really close friends, and she and I have a boundary that we support each other with. Aaron sometimes says, Mum, when can I have a TV in my bedroom? And I say to him, Aaron, you can have a TV in your bedroom when Sam can have a TV in his bedroom. And Sam says to Philippa, Mum, when can I have a TV in my bedroom? And she says, Sam, you can have a TV in your bedroom when Aaron has a TV in his bedroom. And we know that will never happen because we don't want them to have TVs in their bedroom. We also are very different families, and they have different boundaries to us, but we support each other. In the Pickford household, they're allowed and actually encouraged to support Arsenal. And in our family, that doesn't happen, okay? So there are some spaces for differences, but as friends, we support each other. Grandparents, can see a few here today. Do you support or spoil your children's boundaries with their children? It's really important that we support each other so that the children hear the same message. The second thing I want to briefly look at is our relationship with God, children's relationship with God. If you have a relationship with God, then it's probably your greatest prayer that your children will develop their own relationship with him and know his goodness in their lives. And it's another area that we can be proactive in. My parents made Christianity make sense to me. I was born in a Christian family, and a relationship with God was a daily thing, and it was very real. So how can we do that for our children? I just want to say that the suggestions I have are not foolproof, and there'll be many other ways to kind of work this one out. But from our experience, these are the things that we have found helpful. First of all, it's our responsibility to teach them about God. Don't leave it to church or to school, but we need to have times where we do teach them about God, his character, stories from the Bible, whatever is appropriate for the age of your children. Taking opportunities to bring God into conversations. Okay, it's quite easy to just go, oh, that's nice. But then to say, wow, that's amazing. God has really answered that prayer. Okay, so just, grabbing those opportunities. Also, that children follow our example, what our attitudes like towards church and our commitment to church. So setting us as parents or adults need to be good role models to our children. Obviously praying with them and for our children. We, on quite a few occasions, we have stood over our children while they've slept, not to freak them out, but to pray for them, to take the opportunity, especially in difficult times when we need God to change something. We've stood over them. On the way to school, we've moved recently and we drive to school. So we've started, Aaron and Anna and I, we pray on the way to school just about the day, but it means that we focus on God at the beginning of the day. And just recently, my family, I've got a brother and sister, and they've both got families, and my mum and dad all came and stayed with us for a weekend. We had a family weekend because my brother is moving to America sometime this year when he gets his visa. And we, at lunchtime on Sunday, I felt that God had given me some verses from the Bible to share with them. So we sat down at lunchtime and I brought these verses, and we were able to pray together. But what you don't know is that from the time when I was about 10, we used to do that every Sunday as a family. We used to sit down after dinner and we would read a scripture and we would pray for each other. Excuse me. And, often it was a bit awkward and it felt funny and strange, especially if you had nothing going on that week and nothing to pray for. But we did it every week. And there we were just the other week at a crucial time in our big family life where my brother's about to leave, where we were able to support each other and pray for each other. And how thrilling for my mum and dad to have that in front of them, just the fruit of their parenting. And just finally, that it's really important to encourage our relationship with God with role models. And as I look around, I can see that some of you here have been into our home for tea on a regular occasion, and it's not always lovely in our house, but you've been really good role models to our family. Another thing that we have done is that we really felt that in our family situation, Aaron plays football on a Sunday morning. So we needed to think of ways that we could show him what church is like, not just coming to Sunday mornings. And a very long story, but we have ended up starting a new small group, which is where our church is all shared into small groups, and we are a network of people that encourage each other. And we have started a new small group with some very close friends of ours and some friends who don't have families as well, to encourage each other. And what we do is in four weeks, we do 1 week where all the guys get together, 1 week the girls get together, third week we all get together, so you only need one babysitter in a month. And lastly, we do a small group on a weekend where all the children can be involved, and we do proper small group, but with the children. And it's been a huge encouragement to us as a family, and I think to all of us in the group, to just help nurture each other, get to talk about those parenting issues and encourage each other. So one way that we can encourage our relationship with God. So all these things, hopefully, are a practical demonstration of how we can make it go well for our children.
Thanks, Jack. And so we're going to go to the fourth one. Yeah, that's right, the fourth one. Now, it's more likely to go well with us, with our kids, when we kind of realize that God doesn't give us a receipt. I used to be the worst person to buy birthday and Christmas presents for, because I would have like bad reactions, and I was terrible. And like my sister-in-law would buy me a present, and she got to the point where she'd go, "Jonathan, the receipt's in the bag," because I was like a little bit ungrateful. And I've changed, all right, but I used to be a little bit harsh with some of my gifts. Sorry, I just didn't like yellow ties. They weren't kind of enough for me, really. But with our kids, God gives us our children. And when we're kind of in those stages of pregnancy and we think about those verses about, oh, God forms in the womb, we can think, yeah, that's good. But then they come out and they like learn words like no. And they learn other words like no. And they still like batter those words out at you when you're a parent. And you think, it wasn't quite meant to go like this. But God doesn't do gift receipts, does he? He gives us children who are in his plan. And actually, he's the potter, and they're the clay. And as mum and dad, we're kind of God's instruments in that process as well. And he's going to give you the help, the grace, we sometimes call it, to actually fulfill being mum and dad, especially when times are hard and difficult. And actually, we just need to accept that God gives us the kids he gives us. And when we do that, and we're not competitive and comparative, I remember when Aaron came home with his first school report, Jackie picked out every comment to do with character, and I picked out every comment to do with standards. And, we were quite different. And then my friends would say to me, they got this. And I'm thinking, my one didn't get that. But actually, God gives us our child, doesn't he? And he doesn't give us the ones who our neighbours get or our friends. And we need to accept who God gives us, and then it's more likely to go well with us when we roll with that. I think it's more likely to go well with us as well when, as parents, we're kind of on guard. And that sounds a bit like you're on sentry duty. But what I mean by that is, we're not always that good at catching our children do things well. We're more likely to catch them do the things wrong that involve the super nanny, naughty step or something. But actually, our children need us to catch them doing things well so that they're encouraged. Yes, we need to correct and challenge and shape and sort of bend. That's not their arms, but they're characters. But actually, God the Father was good at speaking words of affirmation to Jesus, wasn't he? About, this is my beloved son. And sometimes we're more likely to say no and but and don't, and it gets a bit harsher than that. But God wants us to be good at speaking positive things, not just because we have to be nice all the time, but because our kids need to hear their parents modeling those things to them. Yeah. Also, particularly those of you at work, you need to guard yourself from being too busy. All right, don't you? It can be easy to fill your life up, particularly between danger time of 5 to 7 o'clock in the evening. All right? Honestly, Craig, have you really got a late meeting at work when Ruth wants a bit of extra help? Yeah? You're looking at my eyes. You know what I'm talking about. There wasn't really a hold-up through Tenham. I know your journey. But actually, God says to us, guard your time. Time is a love language for many of our children that they need from us. And Jesus warns people about being too busy in Ecclesiastes 4, about just filling your life up with being busy, when actually we need time with our children. So that's something else that's going to make it more likely to go well. And then also, finally, guard yourself on being over-familiar with your kid. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to recognize them on the playground to pick the right child up, all right, Tom? But being over familiar so that they kind of become your best friend. And, I've had too many things in my work where I've had to deal with parents and children where they actually can't stand each other because the boundaries in their relationships have got blurred. God the Father was in heaven, wasn't he? And Jesus did his will. And our children have to learn to be, kids who learn to do what pleases their mum and dad. That's part of being a good mum and dad, and not to blur the boundaries so that they take the advice when it's difficult and it's hard. And you have to keep those boundaries as mum and dad so that you are mum and dad and not best friends, which has been a little bit of a 21st century disease, perhaps. So, finally, most likely to go well or more likely to go well when we focus on the hearts of our kids. You know what? It's so easy seeing the things they do wrong, isn't it? You know what they're going to do wrong before they even do it. You still, it doesn't prevent it. If you think of Peter in the Bible, if you're not familiar with Peter, he did loads of things wrong, all right? He was one of Jesus' closest friends, but he denied knowing him at the crucial moment just before Jesus was put to death. When Jesus was about to be arrested, he gets out his sword and whops off somebody's ear, not in the game plan. He did loads of things wrong. But he was the one that Jesus wanted to build the first church on. And he was the one who he knew had the right heart. And Jesus caught his heart. When he told Peter, go fish for men, Peter was caught. And with our kids, we have to catch them and sell them a vision for their life that goes beyond the naughty step. We've got to give them the bigger vision of life than that, of what God wants for them and how God can help them, how God is their Father. And that is what's important as a mum and dad. So, Craig and Ruth, Tom and Josie, Kevin Lids, you're not the only ones in the room with kids, but today we're remembering you particularly. And God wants you as parents to give your kids the big picture for life, that He is their heavenly Father who loves them. We're just going to pray really quickly, and then we're going to give thanks for these wonderful kids. All right? Father God, thank you for every mum and dad in this room, whether they're 25 or 65 or somewhere else. And Lord, we say we don't always get it right as mums and dads, but we thank you that you are a God who wants to help us parent our children, no matter how young or how old they are, and that you, God, King of the universe, want to help us parent our children at every day of our life that we are parents. And for those of us in the room, Lord, who aren't parents, pray that we would be good role models and encouragers of children that we know, whether they're in our families or our church or our road, our street, that you would be our helper, who's someone who can role model what their kingly heavenly Father is like as well. Thank you very much for listening.